everyone. You're all very welcome along today, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Today's session is on blockchain or distributed ledgers, and also the new sort of phrase out there as well, NFTs. So our agenda this morning, I'm going to do a quick hello and welcome, which I'm doing, and then we're going to welcome along Fiona Delaney from the SMEChain. After Fiona, we'll hear from Sorcha Mulligan from the SMEChain, and both Fiona and Sorcha are also involved with Blockchain Ireland, the sort of collaborative network or cluster in the Republic of Ireland. We'll have a break after we've heard from Sorcha, and then we're going to welcome along Shane McCarthy, who's one of the co-founders of Downstream Beer, the world's first blockchain beer. After Shane, we're going to have Steve McComb from Innovate UK, who helps run the KTN or the KTP initiative in Northern Ireland. And then that'll be us. Hopefully by 12:30, you can all go and get your lunch. So my name's Gillian Colin O'Leary, and I am part of the team who are delivering the the Digital Surge programme in Northern Ireland. So I know there's some familiar names on the screen this morning. These workshops and our innovation workshops are part of this programme. Anyone is welcome to attend those, and I know we have people from across Northern Ireland, across the island of Ireland indeed, and much further afield, and you're all very welcome. The other part of the programme is 6 days of fully funded mentoring support. That is only open to companies in Northern Ireland who have under 50 employees, but it's from any sector at all. And the mentoring covers blockchain, big data, AI and machine learning, the Internet of Things, cobotics and robotics, and of course, immersive technologies as well. It helps companies get access to advanced technology experts who can give them support to discover how to fundamentally change how they operate and deliver value to customers using these advanced technologies. The first part of the programme is an innovation diagnostic, and then you get the 6 days of mentoring, and after that you get a digital acceleration plan with routing onto more intensive supports and funding. So at the bottom of every slide, you'll see as well of mine that this project is part funded by Invest Northern Ireland, all the local councils in Northern Ireland, and the European Regional Development Fund. And as I've mentioned, it's open to any sector. We have companies with tech startups, we have manufacturing and engineering companies, with companies from hospitality, retail, e-commerce, the service sector, design agencies, agriculture, food production. So lots of different types of company, because there's applications of advanced technology for all sectors. So our next session is next Wednesday, the 23rd, and that's on the Internet of Things. I'm delighted to say we have got coming along to that digital manufacturing on a shoestring. So that is based out of Cambridge University, and they do some fantastic projects using really accessible, affordable technologies and how to use things like IoT and data capture in a manufacturing environment, but there's it's applicable really to a lot of sectors too. On the 30th of November, we have a session on big data, and on the 6th of December, there is a shorter session on innovation, and you're all welcome to join those. That hopefully that QR code works, but all these are on the LinkedIn page too. Oh, not coffee break yet. So I am going to stop my screen share. And I'm just looking here for Fiona's. Oh, I see you. Yes. Hello, Fiona. I'm going to make you host. So has anybody, sorry, I've really flown through that introduction. Has anybody any questions or anything for me? Great stuff. I will make you host, Fiona.
Thanks a million, Gillian. Good morning, everybody. It's really lovely to share the morning with you today. Let me see if I can share my screen. Perfecto. Okay, let me see if I can put this on to present. Now, hopefully this is going to work. So I'm Fiona Delaney, and as Gillian mentioned, I'm based in the Republic of Ireland. I work mainly in Ireland, the UK, and in Spain. We are an agri-tech company, largely working with distributed ledger technologies, creating new kinds of, I would say, trust layers in digital business. It's you know, you have to think about this as, while we do work with farmers, it's really about what we do with data and with digital technology. It's that side of the digital agri-food system that we concentrate on. So we're a technology company, and as such, while we're based in a single country, I think for many of the entrepreneurs and innovators there in the room, you will know if you're building a tech company, I would say a single country or a single nation is probably never going to be big enough for the kind of breadth of vision and the kind of services that you're looking for delivering. So internationalism is a very big part of what we do. Technology, generally speaking, I think, is a numbers game. More users, it means more money for you and your company, and you can offer better value, you have greater sustainability. So Ireland, of course, being in the European Union, the single digital marketplace is primarily the kind of marketplace that we're focusing on. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about the European context and the role of not only blockchain and DLT, but other types of technology. I know Gillian mentioned a number of different, can we call them verticals? I guess we probably could. IoT, AI, various different applications, which increasingly, and we're seeing purpose and value in SMEs and various different business enterprises taking pieces of these technology, plugging them together in a sort of a converged way and maximizing utility for business problems as they are now and in the near-term future. I think we've moved away from this idea of identifying the one problem with the health service, with the food system, and fixing it forever. I don't think that realistically we see that as a viable thing. I think we see more effectively, or more in touch with reality. We are seeing systems that are distributed, changing over time through agile and collective development processes, through consensus or through consortia-based initiatives. And blockchain has a key role in that in many respects. The most important one, I think, is in terms of governance, distributed governance, collective and cooperative governance across federated or consortium systems. And we'll dig into that a little bit. So what I'd like you to do, while I'm going to talk quite a bit about digital tech and use some use cases from the agri-food system, if you think about it from your own point of view, from the business that you're in, and how you might consider this, this type of approach, or what this technology might afford you. So really, really quickly, I'm the CEO of SMEChain Networks. We were incorporated at the beginning of 2019. We run a number of different projects, both locally. The Urban Hedgerow Project is a very local smart cities initiative, biodiversity in the city in Dublin 7 area. Proudfield Companion, on the other hand, is a European-wide information sharing initiative for the agriculture community, offering them pathways to new knowledge in regenerative agriculture. So it is a technology play, sharing information and advances for new product and service development that supports a transition to regenerative agriculture. NGI Trueblow is funding that. We also get funding from EIT, the Department of Agriculture, and a number of different sources. So we are very much in the R&D space. So for anybody who does not yet know what blockchain technology is, I find this pretty useful. This definition comes out of a German workshop. You can see it there. It was in 2018, the reports of the European Society for Socially Embedded Technologies, and the DOI is there. So blockchain technology offers increased value for partners cooperating in a decentralized network by providing data and process integrity, automation of potential, and enabling the transparent transfer of values and rights. So rights might be IP and ownership, some sort of assertion of authorship rights. And essentially with the recent NFT boom and NFT art, I don't know if many of you know about some of those kind of newer technologies, very much in the public realm, the virtual realm. And there was a big boom in NFT art and NFT art sales. And a lot of that was based on this idea of transferring value and rights, attesting authorship rights, and creating something saleable and tradable, which had value in new digital marketplaces. The automation potential, this is like the basic argument of any kind of digital transformation or optimization effort in innovation, in manufacturing and industry at all. Everything is about optimizing process, saving time, money, resources, creating greater transparency or oversight in internal process, all that kind of stuff. And you can use blockchain systems to support those initiatives with the added feature, I think, depending on what type of blockchain or what type of programming language you're using, you get the added benefit of sometimes Turing complete programming using something like the Ethereum virtual machine, where you have smart contracts that can execute on chain completely autonomously. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on what your use case is. And then we can see about providing data and process integrity. Always, anybody who's looking at designing systems, when you're digitalizing or digitizing some aspect of process, or let's say custody information or location information, the vulnerability, and this does not change in a blockchain system, is always about the quality of the data that you're putting into that system. What are the checks and balances there? So that's a small disclaimer about any digital system, whether it's blockchain based or not. So I hope that you find that useful. Not only this was from an industry initiative, but it is also, yeah, let me just go back there. It is also, this is the approach, I would say, that has been adopted at the heart of the European Commission. And we can see that throughout the digital strategy that was put forward and the establishment of the European Blockchain Partnership, which just in the wider context of Brexit having happened, the UK government would have signed the original intent of the European Blockchain Partnership, and indeed is still party to it and to the and is available to take benefit from the European blockchain service infrastructure. So if you are interested in any of these things, as far as I'm aware, in 2022 and indeed into 2023, the opportunities are still available for UK companies to avail of any of this knowledge or any of these opportunities. So I'm not trying to push a European agenda here. I'm just using it as a way of referencing a somewhat federal view of how blockchain can be used to underpin and support innovation at the edge of any kind of public administration. So it's not just in Europe, and we definitely see this in China, in India, not so much in the US, probably more to do with the fact that they are so, while it's a federal state, each of the states has its own unique type of governance, which is set at odds, generally speaking, with the federal view. And we have our own experience of something a little bit like that with our nation states in Europe. So that's why something like blockchain is an interesting prospect when we're talking about things like governance and abutting up to public administration. So I'm not going to go into this very much. European Digital Strategy was authored in 2020. This is just some examples of, digital health ecosystem, privacy frameworks. You all know about GDPR and the real emphasis at Europe on citizens' rights, about data ownership, the right to be forgotten, all these different things. From a business point of view, can be really annoying. Oh my God, I have all this data governance stuff, but actually from the citizens' point of view, they're really, really beneficial. So it's interesting to see it from the both sides there. So European Commission, shaping Europe's digital future. The interesting thing at the intro to the European Strategy for Data in 2020, there is actually a statement that says new decentralized digital technologies offer individuals and companies an opportunity to manage data flows and usage based on individual choice and self-determination. Such technologies make dynamic data portability in real time possible, along with various compensation models. While it's kind of obfuscating that, we're talking about tokenized data ownership. The compensation model there is sort of referencing something that could be tokenized. I'm not saying it has to be cryptocurrencies, it can be any other kind of incentivized scheme. And of course, tokens are not the only way to do that. But it's buried in there is this acceptance at the heart of the European Strategy for Data that blockchains or distributed systems and decentralized digital technologies, including the internet, are part of that entire system. So on the right-hand side there, I just referenced the European Blockchain Partnership and the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure. So there's a little more information in there, and I'll be sharing my slides with Gillian later. So if anybody wants to click into any of those links, they certainly can. This is the newly formatted European Blockchain Service Infrastructure website. And if you just Google that and have a look at it, you'll see those success stories. It's a very, I would say, business-friendly way. It's a B2B type communication. What are the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure picked initially 6 and then expanded it to 9 different use cases, one of which is around refugees and migrants and protecting the borders of Schengen. With blockchain. Verified credentials is another one. Self-sovereign identity management is another one. So these concepts around European citizenship, protecting European borders, protecting European citizens' rights, protecting verified business certification, this idea of verified credentials. It could be university degrees, it could be other types of certification. And how can we transfer value in a secure way that is faster, more efficient, cheaper, and has this built-in anti-fraud or secure mechanism. So if you want to, you can have a look at some of those and see how, because from the UK, even if you're trading into Europe, these are some of the mechanisms that will help your business and your trade, because I would still say that there's high trust between the UK and European Union in terms of business dealings. So blockchain technology and enterprise applications at the heart of Europe, we would see just on this list on the left, all of these different types of things which are considered very important. A number of these are, we dig into them a lot. I'm the co-author of this report that you can see on the right, or the co-editor. It's TR3242, it was published like 2 weeks ago, 22 use cases from right across the world, digging right into both the technical application side with reference architectures into the business value or the business proposition and the business use case for why these use cases have been established. And one of the ones included in it is my own use case, which was called Universal Farm Compliance. And that looks at establishing a blockchain-based trust pathway for data sharing from the farm directly to reporting bodies. So talking about my business rather than that sort of public administration overview, the premise that we have in that Universal Farm Compliance use case, or any other use case really in the digital agri-food system, is that there are gaps in the story of food, data gaps, a majority of which are data gaps on the farm. 80% of the life cycle of any produce, whether it's beef or whether it's lettuce, 80% of its lifespan is spent on the farm. When we look at the Green Deal and the implications of the environmental impact, 80% of any carbon footprint of any type of produce, food produce, is attributed to its lifespan on the farm. And what we're not gathering is in-depth data about that experience, that on-farm experience and the process of producing that food. And we believe that there is a benefit to farmers and primary food producers to seize this middle ground. It's not that farmers are not audited or required to report on their production methods, which in Europe they certainly are, it's a highly regulated process. It's that they don't own that data. That is reported to their national government and then on to the European Commission, and then they get paid through the CAP program. But that data is not theirs to either repurpose or share. And it is given in a somewhat adversarial way, in the sense that it is given to be audited. There are other opportunities here, particularly when we're talking about the Green Deal or the imperative, I would say, of the climate positive action that impacts not just agriculture, but every single type of industry. We can see with new moves right across the world that reporting on ESG, environmental impacts, other types of sustainability metrics, including facilitating circular and cascading bioeconomies. And how on earth are we going to track that? And how on earth do we calculate something like a carbon footprint of products going through these circular supply chains or value chains? I mean, even this little diagram here, when we're looking at provenance in farming, freshness, time to market, end of life, or waste management, and even that phrase farm to fork, what happens to the waste? I don't know if you know this, but 50% of the carbon footprint of protein sources has to be added on afterwards to account for the amount of waste lost between the shelf and the consumer. So on both of those sides. So we're not talking about carcasses or anything like that. 50% carbon footprint is an add-on because so much food is lost to waste. And that is because of the type of food system that we have. Food industry is completely based on kind of supermarket sales, and the shelves are never empty, just-in-time delivery cycles, which is all optimized, but it's not optimized to disincentivize food waste. And so a blockchain can't solve that. This takes cooperative action, and it certainly takes something that needs to be incentivizing the re-engineering of a part of the industry, for sure, absolutely for sure. And it's I would say on the part of farmers, it's completely disingenuous to blame farmers for high carbon footprints in beef production, for example, when 80% of the life of the cattle is spent on the farm. So of course, a majority of the carbon footprint will accrue there, but also what responsibility do they really have for that extra 50% being added on for something that happens quite a long time after the beef has left their farm? So there are some, we see that this is, it's not just a data issue, it's a process issue. And these complex industry cooperative or value chain issues are even difficult to fathom from just one point of view. And I think as we are emerging into, how can we say, this new connected environment, which, you know, where we have responsibilities and curiosity and interest in solving some of these problems together, we understand that we're not just missing data in the story of food, we're missing insight, incentives, and accountability across the value chain for taking action, reporting, and solving issues. And so I would say the benefit of blockchain in the kind of work that I do is that it's like scaffolding or infrastructure in identifying problems and pointing away or even market testing initial solutions. That's 100% what my business is built on. So I hope that is kind of interesting for you guys. I'm going to show you a couple of resources that I have. How to work out what and how a blockchain layer might support in your own business. So we've got something called a decentral business model canvas, which is like the regular business model canvas, but it's just been sort of annotated with a decentralization first view. And there's a blockchain use case data flow model, which is part of the ISO suite of tools. You can have a look at degrees of decentralization and a use case validation checklist. So I've included just one part of this here for you today. So this decentral business model canvas, you'll probably recognize this if you're all in that innovation space. Your problem should be a multi-party problem. If it's just you in your business and your team, you don't need a blockchain necessarily to create transparency. You kind of have full control. And if you don't, that's a probably human factor problem more than a technical problem to solve. On your customer segments, if you're thinking of like a new product or service line, your customer segments, you should think about them in terms of consortium building and co-creating. Your customers, particularly early adopters, are co-creators of value in the system. Think of them as sort of prosumers, where you're collaborating with them to really pick through novel areas of value, whether that's on the consumer side. It could be something like, you know, people are using NFTs for sort of like VIP treatment in the sort of consumer brand arena, access or early viewing on fashion collections, or, you know, private sort of VIP events in the metaverse, getting digital or virtual fashion items, and whether it's Nike trainers or earrings or whatever else. And these things can enhance that brand experience in a very, very, it's not really a tangible way, but it's the interesting thing about virtual reality and augmented reality is that it has the same, I would say, excitement factor or that visceral experience in humans, which is highly saleable and highly marketable. It's why the fashion industry, athleisure industry, is moving very quickly into that whole metaverse space. It's because the psychological experience of receiving something which is perceived as luxury, whether it's digital, virtual, and experienced through your laptop, through your mobile phone, on your watch, whatever, it doesn't really matter where it is. That experience has the same visceral effect on consumers, and that's really, really valuable for brands. And so cooperating with your early adopters in the marketplace is key, absolutely key, particularly if you're going to be looking for funding, VC funding, or any other kind of crowdsource funding, that kind of thing. You need to have a very effective way of describing what it is you're going to sell and who you're going to sell it to, and how that community is reflected within that route to market. Your early adopters, it's not just important validation, they are essentially co-creators of your product and service. Particularly, I would say we're in this very early stages of what Web3, the metaverse, and blockchain is really offering the global digital marketplace. In terms of existing alternatives, they need to be, you need a high degree of like gap or latency in terms of technology. They need to be ready for transformation. So we see on the farms, for example, digitizing on-farm data, it's a really big gap, it's a big problem to solve. And there's a lot that you can do there, and it's difficult for incumbents, or it's difficult for your competitors to come in there. There's not many choices, so you're working together with time, with those early adopters to make solutions together. Blockchain services infrastructure. This is an example of how you might do it. You identify what the value is. You specify your infrastructure, that you're building digital products. If you're using blockchains or Web3 or anything else, you're building digital products, you need to start to think about your infrastructure. What's your intent? When do you tend to release things? What are you going to do first? And then execute. What's your team, and what's your plan for your team? So if we look at the EBSI Cross-Border Public Services Initiative, that's a European blockchain services infrastructure, their value was European countries joining together to explore what blockchain could offer European nation states in terms of public administration innovation. Infrastructure. The very next year, they instantiated a pre-commercial procurement agreement and put it out to tender to blockchain protocols. And they came back with Hyperledger Fabric and a BESI client interface to Ethereum. Number 3, intent. They set up the EBSI experience and specified those 6 use cases initially. This is what we're going to work on. This is our early adopter program. This is how we are going to bring nation state governments and their public administrations together to explore and iterate and experiment with what blockchain services can do for nation states within the European Union, and then execute. That's their early adopter program. So that's just using that little checklist there to see how you might describe it. So I've described something pretty big, which is European blockchain service infrastructure. But if you were looking at your own businesses, you would, like any startup, you identify what the value is, because you're building digital products, and you might not always be doing that. You might be manufacturing something. You've got to think about the infrastructure here first, because your digital infrastructure is everything here. There's nothing else without that. The juice is the data, and your endpoints are basically what you create a brand experience on. So what else? This is one project that we are involved in. And our value proposition for the Crowdfield Companion project, which is funded through Next Generation Internet Trudeau project. And I'm partnered with AgriLedger. It's another SME engaged with delivering blockchain-enabled services to farmers. They work in Haiti, the US, and they're working in starting to move into Africa, into different nations in Africa, largely through the World Bank and other initiatives, development aid type initiatives. So Crowdfield Companion, blockchain-enabled reputation making for smart farming and smart logistics. There's some we're looking at crowdsourcing reputation and valorizing self-reported impact data in the agri-food value chain. And we are working with two ends of the value chain, on farm and in smart logistics, where internet connection is poor, where low, where we expect to be offline first, and where the assurances around data quality are harder to facilitate. So we picked two difficult areas to try and solve first. And you can see here, you know, how we might establish reputation, either for the how can I say this? So we have categories of information that can be shared for a certain purpose. So it could be biodiversity information, it could be soil quality information, it could be around water usage, and how that is measured and valorized is an externally determined process. We work with researchers and environmental protection agencies to establish that. And we obviously with ISO and ISO standards, which are internationally defined and accepted standards that are already market ready. And then we create pathways for anybody, whether it's farmers or anybody in the industry, to learn a little bit about blockchain, a little bit about data collection, and a little bit about the information in these very innovative projects and science research-based initiatives that we have included in the project. So we established these learn to earn credentials, and farmers can either do research projects or they can just read about what might be involved in soil management or in these new regenerative focused ways. So yeah, I think I might have reached the end of my slides. Yes, I have. So I think you might be grateful for that. I will be very happy to take any questions if anybody has any, and I'll be very happy also to share my my slides afterwards.
Fiona, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. I have a question about cybersecurity. Everything, it's nothing's sacred now. Like HSE in the south, hospitals, schools, everything. So is blockchain, these distributed ledgers, nothing's unhackable, and I'm definitely not. That's not a challenge as well. You know, to anybody out there. Is this some way that they can help this? So say somebody is a refugee and they have qualifications, and you know they're in a different country and want to work, but if it was in some system it could be hacked. But is this a way that helps mitigate that threat?
So that sort of example that you've used there, I think we could probably pick apart different things there. But I think if somebody was fleeing somewhere, for example, very quickly, and I don't think you need to just be a refugee, there could be any reason why you're upping and leaving. That can happen in any city, for example. Yes, you can use blockchain-enabled systems and blockchain wallets to store your verified credentials, can be your passport, your bank cards, all of those kind of things in a very secure manner. You could absolutely do that. You could also convert some of your cash. You could take some of your cash out and leave it into, if somebody, I mean, I sound like I'm making excuses for criminals, but if you can imagine, you know, somebody who had to flee a difficult situation, and you see this capital flight is a real risk in a number of different countries. And we saw that, for example, India back in 2018 banned the use of Bitcoin entirely. Now that subsequently they've unbanned it, but before they took that step, before they unbanned Bitcoin, they unbanned the use of blockchain. And in fact, India is one of the greatest, I would say after China, one of the most avid users at public sector side of blockchain technology, because not only does it mitigate against fraud between the government and the public, it also mitigates against fraud and malfeasance internally in their systems. So I'm not making a comment on India, but certainly in digital transformation where paper-based systems are de rigueur, you know, in India, if you walk in with a document that says that you own the house, you own the house, even if you stole it, even if you took it off your granny, if it, you know, you own it. That's the law in those countries. And so we see real business-based vulnerabilities there for concepts of justice, I suppose. And so blockchain systems are being used in situations like that. Similarly, in terms of cybersecurity, blockchain systems, no blockchain has that I know of has successfully been hacked. What we see are a lot of hacks on exchanges, bridges where currency, digital currencies or digital assets are transferred from one exchange through a temporary bridge to another exchange or another wallet. And that bridge, that temporary holding place, is somehow hacked. And all of those hacks, as far as I'm aware, are either attacks on the person, like an individual responsible for like permission management is hacked, basically. And their accounts are taken over, and then their identity is spoofed, or their permission level is spoofed.
Yeah.
Or else it is sometimes it can be internal. Somebody building the system builds a backdoor. So
Okay.
system auditing, all of this good stuff in cybersecurity, role management, systems of least privilege, 100% do that. Anybody I work with hates me because I treat them all like they're like they're robbers. People kind of get used to that after a while, but it's if you're not used to it, it's a bit of a weird step. But yeah, principle of least privilege, instantiate roles before you build your system, and then adhere to them and do all your updates. Good cybersecurity practices 100% stand here. The great thing about blockchain systems is that you get a lot of visibility. So if something does disappear, you can see where it went to, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that's yeah, good point. Any other questions for Fiona? Shout out or put them in the chat there, or raise your hand.
Thanks very much for listening. And Gillian, I'll share my slides with you so people can follow up.
Thank you very much. And I can see Sorcha in her car. She said she was going to be in her car. Can you make Sorcha host, Fiona? If you press the wee 3 buttons, if you go over to her, if you can see her face and the 3 wee blue buttons. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm listening in because I'll have to do this next, will I?
I think that should be done there.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Fiona. Will I kick off, Gillian, or
yes,
do you need words first?
No, I gave a very, I basically said your name and your company at the very beginning. So if you want to do a quick bit of background and then crack on, Sorcha, please. Thank you.
Perfect. That's brilliant, Gillian. Appreciate that. So hi, everyone. Great to be here today. And thank you, Gillian and the Digital Surge for the opportunity to contribute to this programme. My name is Sorcha Mulligan. I'm based in the Midlands of Ireland, though my husband is from Antrim, and we lived in East Belfast up until August 2020. So I know the patch. I've spoken at a few blockchain events since 2018 locally at Belfast University and at Rakuten Labs. My background professionally, I was a London Treasury bankers investing Treasury deposits, the surplus cash of multinational corporates and banks for 10 years in tier 1 institutions like AIB, First Trust, Bank of Ireland and Barclays Capital. I have a deep understanding of the financial and monetary system and how money and, more importantly, liquidity and cash flow moves around at a corporate level. During the financial crisis, I learned about the economic flow or lack of flow of money and who and where it hurt in the economic systems, namely SMEs, unable to access lending and cash flow finance from the traditional banking system. I come from a family SME myself as well, a hospitality business in the supply chain of large multinational corporates. My hometown and region were made up of SMEs and I could tangibly see and feel that this was where the downturn was being felt the hardest back then in our SMEs, our family businesses and communities, the bedrock of our societies. And this was recognizable again in Q1 2020 when the pandemic hit, and once again the flow of capital was not getting to the places that it needed to fast enough or at all. And I think many of us in the audience here could feel the implications of that, and why we're here today with a very worthy program for the digital surge. According to the OECD, the SME sector contributes 72% of GDP in the region, and corporations with more than 1 billion in revenue account for an increasingly large share of that. However, SMEs represent roughly 90% of all firms. A significant number of this 90% of SMEs serve, supply, or are vendors to the 1 billion revenue generating corporates and are the main source of jobs in the business sector, according to the OECD. So that's us in the room today. I left banking in 2015 and delved full steam ahead into researching fintech and blockchain and to establish alternatives to fix the flow of money to get money to those that needed it most. The philosophy of blockchain to challenge systems and democratize institutions resonated deeply with me at the time, and I've heavily invested in exploring what it was, when it would be relevant to me, to SMEs, and what I needed to do to be ready to harness its innovation. My first blockchain course was the Princeton University Introduction to Blockchain course online via Coursera in early 2016, where I learned all about the Merkle tree, blocks in the chain, and why we needed a decentralized alternative to central system failures. And I'll talk a little bit more about courses and sources at the end. My opinion in terms of centralized or decentralized in present day in comparison to 2016 would be that we need a blend of both systems in this transition phase. That could be a decade or decades. But the driving incentive and motivation for my interest in blockchain is that systems need to change and are changing now. And why am I telling you all this? Sometimes we need to reset to think, what are the problems that we need to address? Hopefully some of this awakening might resonate with you or present a deeper question about why you joined this program, what you want to change in your business and potentially your industry. You're in business for a reason, so evoke and awaken the inner entrepreneur is what I always say to my consultancy clients. In the fintech world, I worked with platforms aiming to fix the money flow for SMEs who were turned away from banks because of damaged credit histories from the crisis, or banks unwilling to lend to fund a work in progress purchase order or committed contract as the credit process deemed it too risky. Fintech had the ability to break down the process segment by segment, analyze based on more relevant data and algorithms, and lend against the strength of the multinational in the supply chain. So the strength of a multinational down to fintech or a contract became the new property to release liquidity and cash flow, but early fintech still had its problems. For the fintech, the appeal and unique selling point for platforms was the swift onboarding and approval to get SMEs funded fast. However, the reality was that if an SME didn't have a supply chain management system, an ERP system, a customer relationship management system to plug into and extract APIs, then the onboarding process was very manual and laborious and frustrating for all parties. In addition, over-explanation of the tech and what it could do was and is a problem in fintech and blockchain then and today. I always say, remember that tech should be invisible. Most of us don't know how the internet works or how our phones work. We press a button and give an instruction, that's it. And the same is for blockchain. And I'm sure you've heard that before and you will hear it again. In the same way, in a fintech perspective and when thinking about new financial models, when you go to a bank or ask for a loan, you complete the forms, sign the dotted line, hand over the subsequent documentation, which is all usually very manual. There's very little conversation about what happens in the background at the bank, the credit committees, approval process, how the money is deployed through the layers of the bank's internal systems to get to the SME bank account. And fintechs and technology companies are so very proud of the tech they've innovated, designed and crafted to overcome the the banking systems and other systems to solve problems for small businesses. But getting too technical and overcomplicated sometimes damage new relationships. And I'm sure there are some nodding heads in the audience here that have experienced some kind of overcomplicated or very technical onboarding process or introduction process, where all you want to know is, what can the tech do for me? Is it relevant to me and my business now or when? How much does it cost? How long does it take to set up? Who needs to be involved? And an important one I found out was, do I need to interrupt or involve any of my supply chain relationships? One of the biggest things that I learned about SMEs, again, was that they do not want to have to ask their multinational suppliers for anything. The relationship managers disturb them to ask them anything about change or any questions about the change that's going on in their business. They just wanted to keep them on a pedestal. And there was a potential fear of maybe losing the relationship even by asking a simple question. I got to put this to the test a little bit myself and be brave in my family business during lockdown and while I was on maternity leave. I got stuck into helping our family business to pivot out of various different restriction phases, 6 in total. Indoor service, outdoor service, food, takeaway, and I'm sure considering the focus of this program, a number of the people in the audience had to pivot multiple times in very short notice to stay open. And our family business was closed for 6 months from March to August 2020, but has never closed a day since, because we reacted fast and we engaged our supplier network. So lockdown was a great time to ask those questions to the relationship managers in multinational corporations, asking, is there anything that you can do for us in order to help us, in order for us to continue or survive as a vendor for your brand? And we received multiple rounds of grants to upgrade indoor cooling spaces, to future-proof the business, exterior improvements for outdoor seating, access to apps, online portal, social media, digital tools, and none of this at the cost to us at the time, just time to review and educate ourselves on how to use these different resources. And why am I telling you this? Is because now is a great time to engage one or some of your suppliers and have confidence to ask for their help if you haven't already. Establish what resources they have for you and build your case. No doubt participating in this program will tick a box internally somewhere in the Treasury coffers, and perhaps even some ESG, environmental, social and governance measures for green digital transition and or social for stakeholder investment and support. And perhaps that's already part of this program, that you do engage with some of your multinational suppliers or that you vend for. And one of the things that I found, since we're in the context of blockchain and future technologies, is the digital divide is never far from the conversation. And I think it can be overthought at times, and it's definitely something that I overthought back in 2016, and then having been through various different business transformations, including our own family business internal transformation, things have changed. But when I was consulting for a capital markets trading platform, a fintech funder for SMEs, in the supply chain of multinationals back in 2016, 2017, it became very apparent to me that high-performing SMEs in every sector, from manufacturing to textiles, construction, healthcare, etc., had very little digital in-house. And I'm talking about SMEs who were fulfilling multiple million euro or pound contracts to one or more global brands with no evidence of supply chain management or ERP or CRM system to plug APIs into from a fintech perspective, which is what we were looking for to seamlessly extract financial, regulatory, compliance information to speed up the onboarding and approval process. At the same time, I was researching blockchain, crypto, and the opportunity, as well as threats to SMEs who still had stacks of paper files in windows of their offices rather than SaaS systems. And one manufacturer I remember in particular was a trigger for me. A manufacturer of components for the aviation industry told me that they were undertaking and to onboard an ERP system due to the demands of the procurement departments of their top multinational client. So the likes of Boeing, etc., big players, or they risk being dropped by their most valuable clients. And for them, the reality of starting from scratch to invest and implement in an ERP was a cost of 100,000 euros or 10% of revenue, and would take up to 3 years to roll out across the business in multiple locations, not taking into account offsite days and the salary of the financial director and other support staff. And I know from what Gillian said that there are some ERP professionals in the audience, and no doubt there are options for cheaper in-a-box ERP systems for SMEs. And I did wonder why this organization wasn't going for this type of SaaS, software as a system. And the FD disclosed to me that they were instructed by their large client to use this system of their choice to integrate and interoperate with their own ERP. And it got me thinking about blockchain and interoperability and SMEs on a wider scale who had no ERP or a wide variety of ERP systems across millions of global SMEs from multiple in-a-box providers, and how the systems would interact. So I went down a deeper research rabbit hole, and I established that across most sectors, there were somewhat collaborating in groups of consortiums to test and build blockchain into the supply chain since 2015, 2016 onwards. I mean, it was pharma, telecoms, banks, public sector, tech themselves, and across the board. And I wondered, were any SMEs being included in the consortia? If and how and when would SMEs need to be ready to plug in? And maybe some of the SMEs here have been part of some test consortia, and I'd love to hear about that if that's the case. It brought me back to thinking about our family business again, and the very little digital that we had up till 2020. We had a card terminal installed in 2017, which was the height of digitization at that point. And then in 2020, set up social media accounts, Google business page. So in essence, digitization without having to have an integrated till, ERP, a sophisticated software plugging into their provided tech or portals. And the point being that we were digitized through our supply chain without having to invest. Now, this is manageable with 1 to 4 portals or apps to have to plug into or remember the passwords for, and don't lose the laptop for crying out loud, though becomes cumbersome with many more than that. And this is where an in-house system becomes necessary. I remember during conversations with our own large suppliers recently, I found out that the MNCs themselves, these global conglomerates, were experiencing huge internal and technological transformation under advisory of the Big Four. So Deloitte, EY, KPMG, etc. And it got me thinking, right, so this is 2022 and the conglomerates have been through their consortium testing, and now they're investing in and rolling out using consultants technological change. Are they using blockchain? So simply, you can ask your suppliers directly or across your value chain, or just Google the name of your supplier and blockchain, and you'll likely find a string of articles from Big Four consultancies, and most likely that it's related to supply chain. For this talk, I was thinking of Diageo, because it's very well known, and the alcohol industry is under scrutiny at the moment, obviously because of what's happening with price increases and impact of supply chain. But say for Diageo, if you Google Diageo and blockchain and supply chain, you'll find a Deloitte report in 2016 that shows that they were investing in blockchain technology for track and trace in their supply chain. Then in 2020, they partnered with an IoT platform. And in Q2 2022, a further blockchain and IoT supply chain track and trace announcement was made in India. So that's quite a lot of investment and advancement of the technology from 2016 to 2022. And the likelihood is, if you're interacting with any of their portals, that there could be they could be built on the rails of blockchain. So it's, again, something to think about and maybe research more if you're interested, or even ask your relationship manager if they might know. Another big project for the supply chain was in 2020-21. IBM launched its blockchain-based Trust Your Supplier network, rolled out to its 4,000 plus suppliers globally, the majority of which are small to micro businesses in all corners of the world. And the objective of the platform is to encourage heightened compliance access up and down its value chain. I can share links to all of these resources, Gillian, or directly into the channel here after the talk. In terms of timeline, I mentioned 2016 to date. You don't have to go far to establish what projects have been invested in over the last few years. The one thing I would highly recommend is to be aware of the timeline that you're reading reports on, as attitudes and acceptance of blockchain and its value have been very different to parties over that timeline of a handful of years. So it's gone from a solution looking from a problem and hype to no use case. And then from 2020 onwards, a complete 180-degree flip to full investments and deployment in the tech. And the big four, Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, IBM, Intel, and big tech themselves went through this curve of, we're not sure about this, oh, it's just a hype, to, okay, now we are deploying. There's a few interesting ones for the manufacturing people in the audience, and for anybody who's interested in Industry 4.0 and 3D printing. Air New Zealand 3D printed a component for a broken device on one of its flights. Now, it wasn't a propeller or anything. It was one of the screens within widgets within an individual seat. But the company that made the part, Moog, were contacted to say that this part was broken during the flight, and it was from New Zealand to LA, and during the course of the flight, the component was printed and ready for installation at the destination airport upon arrival, using blockchain technology to keep the IP of the part secure. So that was in 2019, and that's one that really resonated with me as to the integration of different technologies. And I've always been fascinated by 3D printing, and I'm sure there's others here that have been. And so we just discussed a few very sector-specific examples of, like, IBM and aviation and manufacturing, and across the fast-moving consumer industry. But if we wanted to look at a more macro level about what scalable projects are being done across a huge amount of multi-sector SMEs, we need to look at Ant Financial in China, who in 2019 began to launch a project to roll out 1 million SMEs to be onboarded onto the blockchain. And that's on affordable, modifiable, scalable ERP style systems starting at $14 per month. So if you're dealing with Chinese suppliers or in a value chain with any interconnected Chinese suppliers, are you aware if you are already interacting or interoperating with their blockchain-enabled tech? So that's one to think about. So IBM with their 4,000 plus suppliers, and then Ant Financial with over 1 million SMEs. I mean, that's a huge amount. Everyone's going to be in some way relatable to that. I think that there's never really been a better time to build or rebuild relationships up and down your supply chain, to establish what tech they're using, to gather any recommendations for them. Google research what your suppliers have been up to, reach out and say you'd like to speak to them and their blockchain and Web3 projects and how you can participate. Perhaps they're looking for a pilot SME supplier to test their blockchain project. Could you benefit from this type of collaborative experimentation, or is it actually part of the program that you will actually go in site to some large suppliers? Perhaps that's something you can discuss with Gillian if you haven't already. And remember that you don't need to know everything now. Everyone in your network and in this virtual group have come to blockchain at different times and for different reasons. And if it's to innovate, democratize, and change business models, or if it's necessary to interop or operate with a client system, it's okay to be a novice. I've been deeply involved in fintech and blockchain disruption and learning since 2016, particularly during lockdown. I've just returned from a year's maternity leave in the last couple of months, and NFTs have taken over in my absence in the space of 1 year. And I'm sure you've heard all about that from Fiona's talk, and you'll hear about it in Shane and Stephen's. And I'm at a point of deep new learning myself, but I'm always learning. I think it's an absolute necessity. Some people are very humble and factor this into conversations that people are learning at the time, and their understanding of blockchain and other technologies, and others can be impatient, as I'm sure you've experienced. But everyone needs time and respect to learn, so be patient with yourselves and others. And I can say with firsthand experience that there is support available from your multinational clients or other suppliers in your supply chain. If you ask the right questions as a valued member of their supply and value chain who wishes to improve their business, and in turn you will return value to them. And then in terms of research and additional learning, I can recommend numerous free online blockchain courses for you and your colleagues. They're, as I say, free of charge, or there's a monthly subscription, and Coursera is fantastic for this if you haven't already used them. So there's INSEAD's INSEAD blockchain, enterprise blockchain, and they've actually just released a new course about Web3 and blockchain leadership. So I'll send that one in as well. There's supply chain and blockchain technology from New York Institute of Finance. University of Nicosia, Introduction to Digital Currencies, the Institute for the Future and Futures Thinking. So if you're not already engaged in some kind of futures or futuristic view of your industry and where you'd like your business to go, I thoroughly recommend it, because it gives you all sorts of different tools to think about design thinking and how to work within a system of systems, and to look for triggers about what's going on in the wider macro and micro environment that will impact you and your business. And it just makes you very alert as a leader for your team. And I think that is just about me. I said 15 minutes and I've gone a little bit over, Gillian. So hopefully there may be time for a few questions if anybody has any. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you gathered a few points of interest from my story of experience. I'll share all the links, and if any of you would like to reach out, please do. I'm contactable on LinkedIn. Or via email, or directly via Gillian, or through myself.
Perfect. Okay, Sorcha, thank you so much. That was brilliant. That was really, really interesting, and I loved, just how you related it back to the family business as well. Yeah. Really, really good. There was one thing that really
it's consulting. When you're consulting, it's always at arm's length. There's no risk really attached to you, but when you have to turn the lens on yourself and take the risk on behalf of your business, it's a completely different feeling. So I've learned a lot from that process as well, which is why I found it important to include in.
Oh yeah, no, brilliant, thank you. And there was one thing you touched on there, and well, it was really, I think it underlines the whole technology. But Phil and Martin, who are helping run the program with me, and Phil especially, oh my gosh, open source. He is absolutely fanatical about open source. He will not do anything if it's not open source. He's also open data mad as well. And it's that thing of, getting caught into some, a a platform or, you know, a system that you're locked into, and you know, you don't own the data, or, you know, you can't integrate other things, you know. And I think that is a really important thing, especially for a small company. You know, you always have to think, is this am I getting locked in? Is there a vendor lock-in here? Especially when big companies are now moving away from that, and you know, the public sector as well. There's this big open source drive.
Huge, yeah. And that's the thing, you've got to make a business decision at some stage, and if a supplier is coming heavily down on you and saying you have to adopt this system to the detriment of maybe you know, it's a huge cost of investment, and then you have to use another system for other clients. You've got to, what's the value and the future in this? And you know, what's the guarantee that that supplier will stay with you for X number of years after you've done this? You know, it could damage future opportunity. So open source, I am very, very supportive of, and that integration point and interoperability. But it's as I say, depending on the size of the business. I think the group here, from what I read on the Digital Surge material, is that it's below 50 employees. So no doubt there's quite a range there. So some people here will already be using ERP systems, and they'll have gone for the SaaS modifiable versions, and you know, it's in a box, and you have to jump around to fit into it, rather than the new wave of systems that are coming, like Ant Financial that I mentioned, that it is modifiable to you. It is built around your SME, and agile, and a developer, it goes along with you to implement it into your business. And like, that project has been rolled out over the last couple of years. So I'm just fascinated to hear from people once they've spoken to other suppliers in their supply chain to see, are you using this platform, or have you spoken to a Chinese supplier that is, and is it any different from a user interface perspective? So those are all the questions that I'd be asking, because blockchain's live, it's here. If you have a coffee, like you know, Moi Coffee in Ireland and the Netherlands, their coffee supply chain is powered by blockchain. So if you go into a cafe and purchase a cup of coffee, you've just interacted with blockchain unknowingly. So it's all around us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Has anyone any other questions for Sorcha? You can unmute yourselves. I think I have that enabled, or put it in the chat. But I would definitely share her contact details as well.
Yeah, and plenty of links to share in, and if anyone wants to learn from any of the courses, I'll pop those into.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, Sorcha, like, thank you very much for taking the time. That was really, really insightful.
Not at all. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Brilliant, thank you. It's 11:15, so if we want to take a tea coffee break for half an hour and come back at 11:15, does that, I'm going to assume that suits everybody okay. This week I will go on mute when I go on my coffee break, because last week I didn't, and everyone could hear me talking to my husband. But brilliant. Okay, look, I'll see you all back at 11:15. Thank you very much, and bye, Sorcha. Thank you.
Bye. Do I need to give the spotlight back to you now? Let me just see.
Oh yes, please. So if you go over to my window and then my 3 buttons.
Oh, to your 3 buttons, yeah. Make host.
Oh, brilliant. Super. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Okay, right. I'm handing it back to you.
No worries. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll just turn my video on as well. So let me just start. So yeah, my name is Fiona McCarthy, and I am the CEO and Managing Director of Ireland Craft Beverages. For the last number of years, we have been championing transparency in the product world, mainly in the alcohol beverage world. And today I'll just talk you through the reasons why we're pushing innovation in this space. You know, I suppose some of the exemplars being one of the first companies to bring the likes of a craft beer using blockchain technology or digitization to a degree to really empower the consumer and transpire the world of labels into the digital world. So I'm just going to go through a few slides. As you can see here, Ireland Craft Beverages is the parent company, and underneath it we have a kind of brand house, which is everything from Downstream Beer to anyone in the whiskey world. We also own the Two Stacks Irish Whiskey and co-founded Cologne small batch distillery up here in the Mourne Mountains. So for us, Downstream, it was the first to ever use the world of blockchain. I suppose what drove this originally, it was a number of years ago. It was around a lot of small independent producers being pushed out by the large commercial players with multi-million-pound marketing budgets, bringing in what was seen as fake craft beer. You maybe would have seen some of these headlines where, you know, big money's being offered to bars, and a lot of the consumers, the mass consumer, doesn't really know what they're buying. You know, 90% plus of what's even on supermarket shelves all go back to the same players. And this happens in the food world as well. For us, as our understanding and research into the area grew, you know, we realized that there was a lot of fake craft beer, or pseudo craft beer as it's known in the industry, being put on the shelves. So we went on a bit of a R&D mission to see what technologies were out there. My background is in the fintech world. I used to work in heavy software, and I have been following the world of blockchain and Internet of Things and digitization over the last 10 years. I suppose there is somewhat a little bit of confusion sometimes in the blockchain world around cryptocurrencies, and people thinking that they're the same thing. Even now we've evolved into the whole meta world, and a lot of new kind of buzzwords are evolving the same way. I suppose the internet and emails and commerce all come out of that evolution. We're really moving into a new time, and protocols being built in the background. So for us, yeah, it was a research mission on what's the best technology out there, but what's the most commercially viable. So we thought that, you know, obviously databases exist, but being able to time stop and put a full supply chain onto a immutable chain of events, we thought was something that we could really use to our benefit. So there are, and there still are, labels and I suppose use cases here. You can see the independent craft brewery label that a lot of small producers will put onto the bottle. This is widely used in America as well. But again, for us, it's not really a robust solution. You can easily copycat this and put it onto a label, pretending that you are an independent producer, and you know, pretending to the consumer that their money is going to a small local business. That a lot of these small businesses are only run by 4 to 5, maybe up to 10 people, family run, and you know, the fact that they were being squeezed more and more was something that we really wanted to put a solution towards. So for us, it was really about mixing technology with beer, and trying to prove the provenance and authenticity of your beer. And with that came Downstream Beer. This was our first product to come to market, and it was nationally listed with Marks and Spencer's. You know, we didn't go after a big listing with this product. Being a distributor and a brand house, we originally were creating a use case for a lot of our suppliers to use this technology, and it evolved into its own product, and then it evolved into its own demand. So when we were creating it, you know, even QR codes, this was pre-COVID. So we took a bit of a risk, and we thought, you know, the most cost-effective way was actually a QR code to allow consumers to quickly dial into their product and just verify that this is an authentic product, and this does actually come from where it says it comes from. And then in the background, a lot of what we did was actually UX design development, and we put the blockchain in the background. Everything was hyperlinked. So if you did want to see the hash and the timestamp, as you can see here on the right hand side, yes, you can see it. But as we understood, consumers don't really want to know, or when you say the word blockchain, they tend to put earmuffs over their ears. The same way when we use the internet every day, we don't see the technology that runs in the background. So we decided that we would create a more design orientated and engaging UX whenever you dialed into that QR code. So you can see here, when people actually went into the digital world, they actually got to learn about the full brewing experience, who the people were behind it, the story behind it. And that was very engaging. But as I said, at the same time, there was digitization running in the background, verifying everything. And as our journey went on, we realized that it wasn't just the consumer that could benefit from this. It was actually the buyer and all of the stakeholders along the supply chain, the logistics company, and ourselves. If we were putting out, or something went wrong and a bad batch of beer went into the supermarket, it can take up to 6 to 7 days for a large retailer to see, where that went wrong or what exactly went wrong. But with this technology, you can tell within seconds what batch number, where it may have went wrong, was it the yeast, etc. And that was a very powerful tool. But in that, I suppose it all also evolved into the world of fraud, and it is still evolving in that when you send to export, there is a lot of fraud that exists around the world in globalization, and I suppose the supply chains that we have built over the last number of decades. So this technology and timestamping and robust technology in the background really does, I think, assist a lot of global trade. But also with alcohol, one other point that I think is of a big benefit, you have to pay excise in alcohol. And there's quite a few forms and archaic systems in place from our excise bodies known as HMRC or Irish Excise. But realistically, if you're putting this level of transparency onto a product, there is a huge amount of benefit around efficiencies if this was to be integrated into excise systems. So I'll quickly run through. This is really just the design aspects. We optimized the QR and engaging elements. We even done video exactly of where the water came from the brew day. And then I suppose this was more the marketing aspects of the Downstream project. But for us, it really guaranteed the support of the local Irish business. It also guaranteed local employment as well. If we did allow, and we continue to allow large commercial companies to own the world of beer or food, as we kind of see it, monetization kind of kills innovation. So this for us was a very powerful tool, and it has evolved into whiskey. You will probably read about Irish and Scottish distilleries that are starting to really push digitization, especially again in the world of excise. And if you're laying down whiskey on a daily basis, how can you show the level of transparency, especially with Angel's Share, whenever you're putting whiskey into casks, how much of that evaporates into the air every year. All of that is evolving and being used more and more by big, small and medium enterprises here in Ireland and Scotland. And yeah, as I spoke about earlier, some of the other things that have evolved are the world of smart contracts. This was something when we built it, and I suppose it hasn't been used in our end, but we certainly see a benefit if you can run smart contracts over a digital supply chain that you've built. You can quickly verify, say for instance, if you were lactose intolerant or you needed to verify certain aspects of a food or a beer product, is it gluten-free? You could quickly tell that by running smart contracts over the blockchain that you've built on your product. And then there's also the world of AR and AI. And again, this is probably more being used in the legal worlds and other industries, and gamification as well. And this is some of the upstream benefits that we've seen, because everyone was dialing into the QR code. So there is other benefits in terms of you can get a real-time picture of where your product ends up. So you can also almost get a full life cycle of where your bottle or your can ends up going to, and it is, I suppose, going to where it should be going to. You can see here the real-time picture, you know, that a couple of thousand products have maybe went to London, Manchester, etc. So when the consumer engages, it's just like you in your mobile phone or in your Google search, you can geolocate, and then you can really put a footprint onto that product with that level of transparency. And yep, we ended up then building out the product range, and we done a number of products in the downstream range, just really evolving the flavor profiles. And yeah, the new technologies that we have moved into, we work closely with GPass, which is a product authentication, authentic service. And this again is still evolving as the years have gone on. So for us, we do kind of keep our ear to the ground, because it is such a dynamic space. But you know, utilizing of this in beer, we're now looking at putting it onto our whiskey products. A lot of that whiskey is going out across the world, so we're exploring how we can do a similar process for the likes of Two Stacks whiskey, which is one of our hero brands at the moment. These are some of the retailers that ended up getting behind the product as well. Again, we didn't put big marketing spend into it. Whenever we brought this to market, a lot of the buyers did come and approach us because they too wanted to champion transparency. And again, this is just some of the other distilleries that have moved into the space of blockchain to really build trust through the transparency world. So that's most of the story of Downstream. If anyone's got any questions, please do put them in the chat or let me know.
Thank you, Shane. Has anyone any questions for Shane? You can just unmute yourself, I think, or put it in the chat. But I suppose, like Shane, what you've done, there's so many applications across like food, but also like if somebody's creating bits for an airplane, or for a larger supplier, because there's fraud along so many parts of the supply chain, and you're just making sure that
that's it.
You're
I think
that out, or
that's it, Gillian. It is, if you can do it with one product, you can do it with any product. And for us, the whole ethos around transparency, you realize it in the food and beverage world that it really isn't there in many aspects, and it does need to be. And it has grown our brand despite being at that level of transparency. And you realize there are rules written by, even in the whiskey world, by the Scotch Whisky Association or the Irish Whisky Association, that are all written by, the big commercial players for their benefit. So, for us, we have championed even new lobby groups to break down some of the legislation that is quite opaque. And I think, that needs to be done all the way up the chain, even the big companies like Unilever, Nestle. If there was this level of transparency, there is such a trickle effect along the process that it all almost goes back to the world of climate bills and mandates that are coming into play. Because if everyone was at this level of transparency, we would be able to see exactly everything from plastic usage to energy usage. But, when you're such a powerful player in the game, a lot of the times you do get to write the legislation, and it's probably some of the downfall in these industries at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, it's a lot of companies now and are having to do that sort of, net zero, or their nets, their sustainability, show that
sustainability.
And
it's something that we put in, we about 3 years ago I started, or 2 or 3 years ago I started integrating the carbon footprint of a can of beer. And it was quite hard to because there's no mandate or hypothesis built around what exactly is a carbon neutral, and then people kind of jumped on the bandwagon of plant a tree and everything's great. A lot of greenwashing is happening in the world as well of just be seen to be sustainable. And even recently we were at the World Duty Free in France, and it's embarrassing, a lot of what's happening. There really needs to be a lot more work done, in my opinion. There is a lot of, and you see it every day on LinkedIn. There's just a ton of greenwashing being pumped and PR being pumped, but is there actual work being done? No. And that's the unfortunate side of it.
Yeah. No, thank you. And my husband's very excited about that. You won a whiskey award there as well, didn't you? Something for the...
Yeah, we did actually. 2 Stacks. We picked up Ireland's best pot still whiskey. We were the first company to pick it up outside of Middleton in 10 years. So yeah, that was a big award for us. We're very proud of that. And again, 2 Stacks, we just love what we do, very passionate about what we do. We're a small company based up in Uri here. I'm sitting in the warehouse at the moment doing this call, and I'll be back out in the production line soon. But yeah, for small companies, you do become very passionate and you do care about these things. So these technologies are very beneficial for small companies to champion, who they are and empower the consumer to let them know who they are. So yeah, 2 Stacks is going from strength to strength, hopefully, and yeah, hopefully your husband got to try some of the Polaris.
Well, he's going to because he's from Middleton, so yeah, he's
very good.
His grandfather used to work in the distillery, so yeah, he's very, very curious to see what this new kid.
Oh, lovely!
But
that's brilliant.
Anyone, any questions for Shane there? I'll share some of you've some great links as well, Shane, on the
yeah, we've got a few videos and stuff, and I've done this presentation a few times, but I'll send it over. And if people have questions, or I suppose a lot of the questions sometimes that do derive out of this is, what's the cost and how easy is it to do it? It is very easy. There's an interface. It's almost like building a website, and the cost for us in the beer had to be around less than a penny a label. So that's nothing when you're in the world of labeling. 1 to 2 pence is really nothing, and it does become lower as the volume grows. So I think the fact that we were able to integrate it should allow people to see that small companies can do this easily, and if they want to do it, then there certainly is a path to do it there.
Super. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie.
Do you want to make me host again, or
yeah.
There's Stephen, if you want to fire it over to Stephen. Stephen, you're up a bit early, but I know you're always prepared.
Okay, 1 second. Stephen, there is Stephen McComb. Yep, got it. Come on, Stephen. Coast. There we go. Perfect.
Brilliant, Shane. Thank you, and welcome,
Thank you, guys.
Stephen. I'll just go on mute now, Stephen. You crack.
Okay, you have enough for me to kick off then?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll share a few slides if that's okay, everybody. Okay, hopefully you can start to see those slides coming up. Seconds. So my name is Stephen McComb. I work for Innovate UK KTN. For people who are unfamiliar with all the language around this, I used to work for the Knowledge Transfer Network, and then the Knowledge Transfer Network became KTN, and then they merged a few of the organizations together. So now it's Innovate UK KTN. So I'm always struggling to keep up with which of the color schemes I have to sort of put on these slides. So hopefully you can keep up with that a little bit. But bottom line is that I work for UK government in innovation space, and I'll explain some of the organisations as I go through. I work 3 days a week for the Innovate UK KTN, and mainly focus on KTPs, which are knowledge transfer partnerships, which I'll explain in a second. However, in my other 2 days of my life, I'm also do sort of business development, contracting type work, including the Digital Surge. So some of the companies inside Digital Surge I'm a mentor for, as well as other programs and other sort of private contracts. So I understand if you're on the Digital Surge program, what it feels like, and some of the benefits that you've been gaining so far. So moving through to my first of my slides, just to give you a little bit of background into the UK KTN. Works sort of on that interface with innovators, and specifically about trying to bring funding and innovation, or funding to innovators, trying to look at sort of new ways to address the real world challenges and problems that we face across the UK and look for opportunities for businesses like yourselves. The buttons today. Within Northern Ireland, there are 3 KTN people. So Ken Freeham, Joe Ferguson, and myself are the 3 KTN people in Northern Ireland. And we tend to mainly deal with KTPs, but we'll then interface with other programs across Innovate UK. Again, just some light numbers to give you sort of sense that the KTN tends to link into lots and lots of organizations. So generally we can connect ourselves to industries, and it doesn't matter if it's distilleries or somebody in foods or many of the places that we've talked about already today. We have quite wide networks and connections that we can join with. We deal with very small micro startups right through the large companies such as the Rolls-Royces. And lots of innovators. We also have connections to all universities within the UK. So a number of my colleagues across, about 30 of my colleagues in the KTP program, for example, will deal with pretty much every university in the UK. So we're quite well connected. For the purposes of today's conversation, I'm not going to go further into what Innovate UK KTN does. However, I'm going to focus very heavily on the funding options and specifically KTP. And just to give you a sort of a small sort of flavor, if you're not familiar with it, there are lots of different types of funds which are available, and you as a company can possibly apply for those. I've given you a small gathering of the types of grants that quite often we're talking about. So smart grants is one of the ones which is on a constant cycle of every 3 to 4 months. There tends to be a smart grant fund. A number of people in Northern Ireland have been successful on those. A number of people have applied and been unsuccessful. So they are available and tend to be on roughly a 3 to 4 month window. You'll also find that there's sort of an ongoing sort of launch of different initiatives of different topics. So I picked some of the examples out there. There tends to be funding around net zero at the minute. There's a lot of net zero funds covering all different types of industries. There's a lot of stuff comes through Industry 4.0 about how do we do better manufacturing in industry. There's quite a lot of stuff in energy, healthcare tends to be sort of a fairly frequent sort of initiative on various shapes and sizes. And then sort of more random things where maybe they're trying to encourage more diversity of innovators or other types of women in innovation or other types of initiatives that have a purpose behind them. So I'm not going into those today, but just to highlight there are other funds available. And when you're looking through the list of them, some of them will be relevant to you, some of them will not be relevant to you. So I'm just making you aware that they're there. Small Business Research Initiatives is another one, SBRIs, have been about for a number of years. And in my particular view is that they're particularly exciting because they're 100% funded, where some of the other funds aren't. Again, I'm not talking about those today, but just highlight to yourselves that there are quite a number of other initiatives and fundings. Future Leaders Fellowship, again, one that I'm personally involved with across the UK and linking with businesses, offers up to £1.5 million for an individual who is exceptional and is going to be a leader of the UK in the future. So that type of fellowship type fund is coming through already today. But some of the other work that I'm doing about post-EU work, you're seeing more of those types of fellowships likely to be available. Traditionally, they were mainly focused at universities, but we're now finding that there's a bit of an appetite to try and link them in with businesses. So if you have someone that is a real sort of stretched brain of how you're going to lead the future in some sort of a fellowship type idea, you may find your types of funding coming through. Again, I'm happy to talk about those outside of this conversation, but just make you aware that there are fellowships and particularly reaching into businesses, new types of fellowships emerging. And then the last I have on my list, and it's not a full list of all types, but KTPs is my bread and butter for most of my day job. And I'm going to talk about those in more detail now. So I thought it was easier to start with a picture rather than lots of words. This is one example of a KTP. So the KTP is a knowledge transfer partnership. The knowledge transfer partnership involves a university who has lots of insight and deep knowledge. It involves a company who is really keen to get that deep knowledge transferred into their company. And then what happens is that those two parties, the company and the university, will make an application into my organization, which is about trying to get funding to support a 2 to 3 year project. Okay, Within that funding is mainly focused on about employing a recent graduate. The term recent's a bit vague deliberately, but it's that sort of sense of somebody at the early stage of their career and how they can be the conduit between the university and the company about taking that knowledge across. In this particular photograph, Queen's University in Surden and Lisburn won the best KTP for the whole of the UK. They were competing against roughly 500 different organisations, so really exceptional sort of win for Northern Ireland and for Surden. Guy Jonathan Armstrong in the middle there holding the trophy, and then on his left is his company supervisor and his right is a professor from Queen's. And again, just highlighting that sort of sense of a real prestige to it, a real big win for Northern Ireland, but also sort of that sense of they were trying to drag knowledge and insight from the company or from the university into the products, which were then being the next line of business. During this KTP, Surden, for example, joined with other businesses actually in the AI space as a result of it. And I'm going to take full credit because this was one of my KTPs, and although I wasn't the intelligent person in it, I'm still taking full credit. But that sort of sense of a company, a university, and a recent graduate in the middle of it. Also sort of did a small search across the sort of wider KTP pool, just to give you a flavour of the types of things that KTPs do, which is relevant to the Digital Surge programme. I haven't any great intelligence behind any of these ones, they're not mine. But equally, sort of, you'll see some constant things that you're familiar with about AI, about data, about machine learning, about blockchain. So each of those companies have recognized that it would be good to bring some insight into their company. They recognize that perhaps the university or particular academics in the university have specific insight that they want to drag across. The case then they build up is to say, we can change the world, we can make a few extra million in our company and change the world, and therefore they get the funding behind that. So again, as I picked these randomly this morning just to really give you a flavour of the types of things. It's all public domain information, so I haven't hidden or haven't disclosed too much. So taking that a little bit further, so what the heck is a KTP? Well, I mentioned it's a three-way partnership. So there is a university, there is a business, and those two together then as part of the funding employ a recent graduate. So it's that three-way. As an advisor, my job is to make sure that all three of those parties are benefiting. So it's not just that the company makes £1 billion and moves upwards in their skills. I'm looking also for the university to get a benefit from that link to the company. So I want their research to be better, I want their teaching to be better, I want them to look at all the grants beyond the funding that we're talking about. And from the recent graduate, I want them to have an exceptional experience where they're learning about how to be in commercial world, they're learning how to test their models, they're learning how to deal with other sort of pressures in a business. So between those sort of three parties, all are gaining in the experience. At the end of that 2 to 3 year project, the KTP associate, which is the graduate, has a question mark: do they then become an employee of the company, or do they perhaps go and chase another commercial opportunity, or equally they may choose to go back in the university land. That's their choice. As a company, they may choose to employ the person, they may choose to say, no, that's the end of it, thank you very much, we've learned lots. So all these possibilities of where we can go next, but in all cases, the three parties have benefited, and that's our focus. The funding is majority from the UK government, so if you're a large company, you get about 50%. If you're a smaller company, then you're about 2/3 of it is paid by the government. So it is sort of that majority funded by the UK government. The funding covers a mixture of the graduate salary, as well as a small sort of amount of consumables and travel. And on top of that, there is also a little bit of money around trying to work with, there's a little bit of money associated to the researchers and funding the actual professors, etc., or research doctors who are leading it. So that sort of sense of funding comes from the UK government. They are available across the whole of the UK. So, for example, I have a KTP in the northwest in Derry, where they are actually working with a university in Salford. So that sort of sense of where does the skills lie is quite important. We prefer it to be the local university, but if the skills aren't there and they're actually somewhere else, that's fine as well. So we have this sort of, the whole of the UK is covered. And genuinely, we have everything up into the Highlands and Islands, right the way down into Devon and across to the west of Northern Ireland. So we cover all of the areas. The majority of universities are inside the pool, so we can work with most universities. There is over a 40-year history, so this is what sort of been alive and kicking and been tested over the years, and is very valuable across the UK. And roughly we have sort of a window where every 3 to 4 months is usually closed. So if you as a company decide you want to apply for this, you sort of plan it for when's the appropriate time. So moving on to the next slide then. So what is a good KTP? And this is quite useful for you as a company, even beyond KTP, because it is that sort of sensible. If you're applying for funding, how do you apply? How do you convince somebody? So the first thing is that it has to be an innovative project or of strategic relevance. A number of times I get a company coming through and said, oh, we're going to do something in big data. And I look them in the eye and say, what do you mean by that? I don't get it, because I've got 50 million other people asking about something big data or AI or data. So really that's sort of sense of what is the innovative project? What's innovative? What can I not buy off the shelf today? And really sort of that convincing somebody to say, this is innovative. This is something that does not exist today. This is something that our company feels we could become a sector leader of. Is quite is nearly the starting position. I'm quite scathing at times and say around somebody's coming to me and saying, I've got an AI project. Of course you'll fund me, because sort of 60 to 70% of the projects claim that they're doing something in AI. So you have to really define yourself bigger than that and better and more clearly. There has to be a sound business case. So if we invest this money into this project over the next 2 to 3 years, what's the likelihood of a return against that? And obviously we can't guess the future. However, there needs to be a scale to say, we invest £200,000 into this, the likelihood is that there's a revenue stream of a couple of million or $500,000 or whatever, but a strong sense of profit coming through. Clear knowledge transfer. So there's something in the university which you want access to knowledge-wise, and being able to transfer that and embed that within your company. It's really important to us. Stimulating and challenging for all three parties. Again, if we see a project that just sort of feels like it'll trundle along, but not actually stretch all of the parties, again, we probably think that's not the right one for us. Challenging the practices of the company and the market, again, sort of something that sort of stretch element. And this element of being able, the academics, to translate what they know into something in the commercial part is really quite valuable and important for us too. Where I see that sort of really working really well is where an academic has been working on some particular area, they've modeled it and they've tested it and they've worked it in research land, and then being able to throw it across in the business and actually work that through in a real tangible, fitting in with all the legacy products, fitting in with the changes in the market, fitting in with people. That's a really quite special sort of application, and then they get a lot of feedback as to what didn't work and what did work and what was actually better than they thought it was going to be. So really quite interesting. And then the last part is just that recent graduate does accelerate their career either with the company or other places as well as possible too. Again, just give you a flavour of sort of the scale of this program, because a lot of people have not really heard of the KTP program, but it could be sort of up to, there's vague numbers because they keep changing obviously, but roughly about 800 partnerships sort of exist with roughly 100 universities, partners, maybe 759 business partners. So you'll see sort of there's a mixture. Some universities will have lots of KTPs, others will have less. Some businesses even may have more than one KTP at different times. So there's sort of a mixture of that sort of 5 to 800 number is fairly frequent for us. The mix goes across everything from the very, very small scale through to the larger scale. Sorry, the micro on the right hand side, that's not really large. But you get that flavor that spreads across. So we're not sort of picking one particular organization, one particular size of organization. What I would say at the micro side of it, we do tend to focus on companies who can absorb the skills. So if you're a one-man band, it's not for you. If you're sitting about that 4 to 5 employees and have a bit of scope and scale, perhaps that's about the starting position, I would say, for a company, for micros. The large size, there's no maximum on the large scale size of the company, but we do have experience right across all of those. If you are interested, And this is something that could be relevant to you, just to give a flavour of the next round. So there has been a close round in the middle of November, so we're not planning for that one, but the next close is likely to be around the 25th of January or the 29th of March. My experience is probably you need to be starting to engage with the university about 2 months before an application is submitted. You do it as a joint application with the university and with the specific academics. And therefore, it takes a bit of time just to wrangle that through, agree a project plan, agree the objectives that work for everybody. And that just takes a bit of conversation and a bit of sort of back and forward, and can really sort of stretch all the parties to bring together something really quite strong. Contact wise, it doesn't really matter if you start that conversation with myself or my colleagues on the KTN side, or equally both the University, Queen's University and University of Ulster have a dedicated person who's responsible for all KTPs, and they will have teams underneath them working with them. So both Queen's and UU locally will have those. Other universities will too. The colleges also in Northern Ireland have quite a number of KTPs. So for example, I deal with the Northwest Regional College quite heavily, and Southern and Southwestern, etc. So most of the colleges will have some link to it. And we'll have various levels of success with it. So if you have good relationships with academics inside the colleges, that's possible too. Equally, Invest and I are a co-funder alongside Innovate UK. So again, there's a partnership. If you have a client executive in Invest and I, that you can go through that direction. Either way, it will end up back with somebody like myself or Joel or Ken, who will work with you in the university to progress it. Okay, so I'm going to stop slightly on the KTP side. I'm going to park that. Happy to talk about that later, further, separate. But I'm going to just sort of highlight just 3 areas if you're interested in general funding. Again, I'm not going to go through them in detail, but just sort of highlight them. So firstly, my own organization, KTN. If you go into the KTN website, and on the bottom left of it, I believe you can sign up to newsletters. If you go into that section, you will pick the areas that you're interested in. So, for example, if you're interested in augmented reality or similar, and you pick those areas, they will send you newsletters which will highlight the emerging funding in that area. Equally, if you're healthcare or manufacturing or similar, they will gather together the different types of funding and send you an email which sort of highlights some of those areas, or new webinars, etc. coming up. So that's number one. Second option, Innovate UK. If you do a Google search around Innovate UK funding, you will come up with that website on the left-hand side, you see, with innovation competitions. That's a constant changing feast of information. As of this morning, was 32 open competitions, as you see on that screen. And your role probably will be to look through and see the ones that are relevant. Not all of them will be relevant. I guarantee you not all of them will be relevant. So if you see at the top left-hand side, unless you're in aviation, you're unlikely to be in the future flight area. However, the next one down the list may be relevant to you. So you're having to sort of filter through those and pick out the areas that are relevant to you. And then lastly, I mentioned that there are other, within the Innovate UK family, there's also what was the EEM is now called Innovate Edge. And it has, again, sort of links to other sort of funds available. Now, that's just 3 sources. There are other sources of funding. There are other sources that gather together the different pots, but I thought it was just worth highlighting at least something to start you off if you weren't familiar with it. So those are the 3 organizations I mentioned, and I'm going to stop now and stop sharing. And I'm happy to answer questions if useful.
Brilliant, thank you, Stephen. And I know at Invest and I hosted Innovate UK last week, and FP McCann, Gareth from there, did a presentation on the work that they'd done with their student, and it was amazing, you know, and the impact it had on the business. Now, obviously, FP McCann is a huge manufacturer, but they were wasting so many pipes, just weren't, not so many, the pipes that maybe weren't up to standard, how to spot those before they got into the supply chain, and it was just using AI, but the student had worked on that, and it had a huge impact on the business, you know, obviously increasing profits, but also making them that sort of sustainable, and making sure that they weren't wasting cement and resource. and obviously energy and whatever in the production. But it was really a really interesting thing, and they had said they'd had great results from the program, because a lot of the people who were engaged stayed on. So I know it is so difficult for companies to recruit people, and they'd found that a really, really good way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fair point there, just around sort of that, if you are a sort of smallish company, you are in a very, very heavy or tight market to try and get the right skills. The likes of the KTP program alongside the recruitment can be quite useful, because it's like puts them into like a graduate development scheme nearly, because they then are trained alongside other peers across the UK. So about 10% of their time is actually working on development. So it's like a management development type scheme. So I find sort of quite a number of the smaller companies who perhaps aren't able to compete on a salary are able to compete because they're offering something else. So you may find like our graduates are also accessing, say, a master's program as well as other sort of skill development, so they have a bigger package and they're more likely to stay. So I find that with sort of the pure graduates. Also, if you have a very scientific one, say your PhD plus type graduate, those people are then have access in the other university capability and skills and research information. It just helps them to stay slightly longer and be more engaged.
Brilliant, thank you. Has anyone any questions for Stephen? You can just shout out or put it in the chat there. I've also put in the chat the feedback form, if you wouldn't mind just taking it. It'll take you 2 minutes to fill it out, and it's really useful for us to know your feedback, so we can keep improving. But also I need it just for investing in the councils, so it's really helpful for me too that way. Any questions? Stephen, will you be able to share your slides with me and I can pass them on as well, or even just the links? And
no, the slides should be shareable. I don't think there's anything in there. So any information I used in companies is all public information, so I haven't sort of shared any crown jewels.
Great, okay, thank you. Anyone, any questions? Well, I think that's it then. Like, thank you all for coming along. It's 12 o'clock, so we finished up 15 minutes early, which is great for everybody. And with the IoT session next week and big data on the 30th, and you're very welcome to come along to those. But thank you very much, everybody, and feedback form if you have a spare 2 minutes. But and I'll share the presentations and any links that our presenters have given me. And also, if you have any questions you think of afterwards, just fire them over to me on email or through LinkedIn or whatever, and I'll pass them on to the presenters today. So thank you very much, and enjoy your afternoon.